Wise Child by Monica Furlong, Chapter 11, Secrets. By the time I was up and about, the tiny painted faces of the snowdrops were showing in the garden. I noticed too that the light was changing day by day, that the birds were showing on the bushes, and that in the evenings the blackbird was singing his special just before spring song. Juniper was cutting a dress for me from a bolt of shimmering green material, the most delicate pale green, like the colour of beech leaves in early spring, when they are only half out and surround the tree in a green cloud. For me, and that marvellous silk, where would I wear it? At Beltane. At Beltane? All I knew about Beltane was that it was the time when people took their sheep and cattle to the shylings, the summer pastures. Yes, and that it was the time they lit fires on all the hills to Phelan's disapproval. It is the great feast of spring, of course, the time of joy and thanksgiving and pleasure. It is one of the times when we meet. We, those who live in the rhythm, who watch the seasons, who die with the winter and rise with the spring. She seemed to be talking more to herself than to me. There's a feast? Yes. Where? A long way from here, several days' journey. What will I have to do at it? Say some words, which I will teach you beforehand. Walk in procession to the ceremonies. She was draping the material around my shoulders as she talked. I had never touched material so fine and delicious. You will have a green velvet mantle and a tiny crown. You will walk barefoot. Will there be other children there? Yes. When will we go? I will tell you near the time. One thing, don't tell anybody, not even Coleman. It was hard keeping secrets from Coleman, especially as I wanted to tell him about my new dress. I was struggling with my promise to Juniper one morning when he and I were sitting up in the hayloft of the barn, snuggled under the hay for warmth, though there wasn't much hay left now. Morag wants you to go see her at home on Sunday after Mass. Why? I don't know. She doesn't want you to tell Juniper. I was puzzled. What could Aunt Morag have to tell me that Juniper mustn't know about? Phelan preached against Juniper again on Sunday. He didn't use her name, but everybody knew it was her he was meant. I had not been in church the previous Sunday because of a cold. What's he got against Juniper? She does no one any harm. She's kinder to people than he is. She's not a Christian, is she? He thinks that's wicked. I felt torn. I knew that you were supposed to be a Christian, and I didn't want to be classed as a wicked person, but I knew Juniper wasn't wicked. She took care of me better than anyone had in my whole life. Before, behind the long words and the tantrums and the cocksureness, I had been lost and lonely and afraid. Juniper had found me, had placed me on a warm lap, had become someone I trusted more than I trusted myself. He's silly. I think he'd hurt Juniper if he could. This started such a dark, fearful feeling inside me that I pushed it away and refused to think about it. Tell your mother I'll come, I said. I did not tell Juniper that Aunt Morag wanted to see me, only that I wanted to spend Sunday with my cousins. Her generosity almost made me tell her on the spot. Why not take Tilly? She said. You'll get too tired if you walk it. When Sunday came, it was a day of blue sky and brilliant frost. Every puddle was iced, and tiny frozen water drops clung to the branches. My hands holding Tilly's reins were very cold inside my mittens, but I enjoyed the journey down the steep path, talking and singing to Tilly, whose beautiful ears moved as I spoke to her. I tied her to a fence outside the church and went to join my cousins. As I walked into church, I was conscious of how nice I looked, my hair lying well brushed on my shoulders, my warm blue cloak matching my blue dress, my boots thick and warm and of good leather. Perhaps I remember that morning so clearly because of the shock that followed it. I went back to my cousin's house and ate their lunch of tripe. After Juniper's house of worn furniture and bare floorboards seemed bleak and comfortless. After Juniper's house, the worn floorboards and the worn furniture and bare floorboards seemed bleak and comfortless, but there was a good warm fire. Living with Juniper or just growing up a little had made me more careful that what I said did not hurt people unnecessarily, so that I did not make any comment. What was always a shock was the noise those children made, the shouting, the fighting, the tears, the laughter. It was under cover of all of it that Aunt Morag said, "There is someone wishing to see you, out in the field behind. Before you go, I want you to know that this has nothing to do with me. It was your uncle's doing." For a moment I thought Finbar must have come back. Then I realized she would not have told me like that. Not really wanting to go, but driven partly by curiosity and also by her expectation that I would go, I got up and moved toward the back door. "Where's Wise Child going?" little Morag asked. "Never you mind," said Aunt Morag, and out of the corner of my eye I saw Coleman look up quickly. I see now that I was already afraid, as if I knew whom I should meet in the field. The sun shone in my eyes as I moved out the door, blazing on the snow and on the icicles that hung from the eaves. I was in the field, and there was someone in rich velvet standing there, and all at once I knew the familiar smell of perfume, like hundreds of roses crushed together, who it was. I stood awkward, paralysed, miserable. "Well," said Maeve, laughing. I thought she was the most beautiful lady I had ever seen. Her dark green dress fitted her slender waist perfectly, and the white shawl about her shoulders set off her red hair, her great green eyes, her fine cheekbones, her long neck. She was not in the least like me. When she smiled, her teeth were whiter than snow. "How's Juniper?" she asked. I couldn't manage to speak and just nodded. "Not very fond of me, I imagine." She never forgave me marrying Finbar. I put this away in my mind to think about later. Maeve put an arm around my shoulder and ignored the fact that I shrank slightly under her touch. She began to walk slowly, and I was obliged to walk too. "So what do you do all day up there in that white house?" My voice came slightly squeaky. "Lots of things. We make cream and cheese, and we dry the herbs, and we spin and weave and look after the chickens." Maeve seemed very amused. "Juniper is still living like a peasant, is she?" "Not at all," I said. "We read Latin and we do mathematics, and I'm learning the harp and lots of things by heart." "Poor little Margaret. So it's work, is it?" "No, there are stories and songs." I started to flounder. Life with Juniper was hard work, but not in the horrid way Maeve meant. "Well, at least you look well fed." Her words brought back an old feeling that I was the disappointment to her, perhaps because my looks took after Finbar and not her at all. "I thought it was time you and I had a talk. I want you to think about coming to live with me." Even Maeve noticed how I shrank this time. "I know you think I deserted you, and that was hard for you, but just look at me. Do I look like a woman who could stay at home with nothing to do but look after a baby and Finbar away at sea all the time? Not that he wasn't handsome, the best man for miles around, but that was no good for me if he wasn't actually ever there." For a moment I saw it all through Maeve's eyes. Although I shrugged my shoulders away from her arm, I continued to walk beside her. Even her voice was fascinating, low and expressive, though fiercely proud. "You are a big girl now, and we could have fun together, you and I. I wouldn't have to do the housework if you lived with me. You wouldn't have to do the housework if you lived with me, nor do any lessons that bored you. I could give you whatever you wanted. Clothes, jewels, toys, ponies. You would love my house. It's big, it's filled with beautiful things. And you would have a room next door to mine hung with tapestries and full of books. Lovely food to eat, too, and all the sweets and cream you like. We are not meant for this dung heap," she indicated the village, "you and I. I will travel with you, and you can learn languages. And how to dress beautifully, so that one day young men will adore you as they adore me." I do not know how long she talked, nor whether I have remembered her words correctly. I was under her spell, and what I was aware of was not so much her words as the radiant picture she painted of the life that might be. While she described it, I wanted it passionately. It was like a terrible thirst inside me. I think what broke the spell was that Coleman had come out of the cottage and was standing with his feet through the rungs of the gate, watchful, alert, his gaze on the two of us. "There's Coleman," I said. "You don't have to make up your mind now," she said. "The offer is there for you. My house is only about a day's journey from here. In the meantime, I have a present for you. She reached under her cloak and handed me a stone. It was a pretty stone, I could see that, and I took it quickly from her and put it in my pocket and ran away from her toward the house. As I drew near, Coleman got down from the gate and silently opened it, and I ran through it and into the house, snatched up my cloak, and went out from the front door with Tilly's saddle over my arm, strapped on the saddle, and rode away without looking back. Juniper was not at home when I got back. She often went to see Cormac on Sunday afternoons. Like a sick dog, I headed for my nest and pulled the bear's coat over me. I think I heard her voice calling me, but time seemed to pass, and the next thing I knew, she was sitting beside me on the bed. "Wise child, look at me." She burrowed into the bear rug, uncovered my head and turned it toward her. I mumbled one word. "Maeve." Suddenly she bent and picked me up in her arms, bear rug and all, and carried me down the stairs. In a sense all was as usual. The sweet-smelling fire, the two great cats, the clean hearth, broth cooking on the fire, the scent of herbs drying in the rafters, of rushes on the floor. Yet it was as if I was seeing it all through a distorting mirror. The chairs and cats and fire, tiny, away at the end of a long thin hall, everything slightly misshapen, a sound like whispering, a whispering of words that could not be heard, that made my hair rise on my head with horror. There was a strange whiteness or blueness in the room that drained it of colour. I sat rigid, my eyes staring out of my head, not speaking. Juniper stood looking down at me. I avoided her gaze, guilty and ashamed. "Did she give you anything to drink?" she wanted to know. I shook my head. "Or any sort of present?" I hesitated. Before I could speak, Juniper took my silence for a negative. "Good." I felt relieved. She moved to the table and began selecting herbs, which she pounded in a mortar and then strained into a cup. It made a golden-looking drink. Juniper, I noticed, no longer looked darkly glowing, but ugly and witch-like. Her body bent, her hands grossly worn with work. "Who are you?" I asked her as she handed me the golden drink. "You're Juniper," she said. She went to the harp and started to play. To begin with, I recognized the tune, but then something quite different began to happen to the music. It fell into great shapes that tumbled about the room. I sat and watched them, not touching the drink. However, some quality of in the music reached me. It was as if a sudden sharp jerk took place inside me, and I was myself again. Juniper was Juniper, Ruby was Ruby, Pearl was Pearl, and the room looked as pleasant and peaceful as it had always been. I passed a hand over my forehead. "That was awful!" Juniper stopped playing and came and sat beside me. She was no longer ugly. You must try not to see Maeve." "How can she do that to me?" "Because you are not yet free of her. Part of you, because you are not yet free of her. Part of you is still part of her, and because she is a very powerful woman. One day you will be free, and she will not be able to hurt you anymore. She is very beautiful, very. You wouldn't let me go live with her, would you? Only if you were quite sure you wanted to. She has a house only a day's journey away, you know. She offered me clothes and jewels and ponies and dogs and sweets, and not having to do but any boring things and go live with her. She would make me into a beautiful lady whom young men adore." "Tempting," said Juniper, with just the finest edge of scorn in her voice. "I am her little